Okay, this is part 3 of the astral planetary soul retrieval mission that I just went on last night, on the night of February the 3rd, 2014. And at this point, we're talking about how the hallways were getting cleared. So this hallway, designed to look like this beautiful paradise of a forest, but really only pictures on a wall, was getting cleared, and they escaped the first clearing. Because if you got cleared, you were dead, pretty much. No one said it, but everyone knew it. And so this girl and her android companion, friend slash pet, were there hiding from the first clearing, some type of beings moving through the center of the hallway to make sure everyone was out of it. And they hid effectively. And then another clearing came through, and they did not hide so effectively. And they got moved out. And this time, it's interesting because the hallway seemed clear, but at the second clearing, I think they went out behind the pillars, which is where the girl and her android were hiding. So now they see this whole group of creatures, of people and also animals. So I actually did see animals here now that I'm remembering it, coming, running up the hallway, kind of like the way that the land clears of its beings before a forest fire. You know, everything hops out, or before even an earthquake or a hurricane, you see the animals moving away from the spot that's going to be affected. And that's what happened in this dream. So this time they got cleared, but rather than going the other way, because when they came in, the way that they were cleared was back out the way that they came in, which was some big type of transporter room, which I also realized at this point was some type of either gas chamber or incineration device, because what happened this time was that first, after they got grouped together, they didn't go into the chamber. They went forward to the other end of the hallway, and where they'd never been. And the other end of the hallway opened up to this body of water. And the body of water had boats going along it. But it was kind of still dangerous. If you got in the boats, you were dead. Most people didn't know this because most people were in the slavery mentality. You don't question, you don't wonder, you don't ever even think. You just plod, both on the outside and also on the inside. So what's happening at this point, though, is the girl and her android friend are becoming activated by the levels of fear that they're feeling. And they're starting to be jolted out of their gray, hypnotized, drugged reality and realize that something else is going on. So at this point, I was more keyed into the android's perspective, and he somehow said some type of diversion so that they did not get on the boats. And so just about everybody else got on the boats. Not every single person, there were more, but a lot of people got on the boats. And then as they're moving back toward the chamber on the other side of this really long, really huge hallway, some of the elven human hybrids came out to assist them on their way. And earlier in this series of this planetary soul retrieval dream astral travel mission, I was talking about how the head honchos, the people who were running the show in this reality, were the elves. And unless you were in this place going through this experience, you didn't even know that elves existed. No one ever mentioned the elves. But as soon as someone mentions the elves, and I'm not talking about little Christmas elves or like little gnome kind of things, I'm talking about high elves, like Lord of the Rings type elves. They weren't exactly the same as that, but that's more similar to, rather than like the shoemaker's elves, that kind of thing. So they're getting corralled back to the other chamber, which was an incinerator. And the android now, and androids are very common in this reality. Even poor people had androids. They were just kind of available. Artificial intelligence was very cheap here. So he mentions to some of the people already in the chamber that some type of code word type thing where this is not what you think it is and it's dangerous and we shouldn't be doing this. And so two of the women that were already in the chamber and couldn't get out, who were somehow activated enough to hear him, created a diversion. And they were just saying to each other, hey, let's stretch, which is a very interesting thing. And they started to stretch and kind of stand in the doorway and block the door so no one else could get in. However, the powers that be that were corralling everyone, who were at this point these elven human hybrids who were also enslaved because they didn't think outside of their own paradigms. Because at this point, the android is realizing, I have to talk to the elves. But the android is limited by his language barrier. And so he's just saying to the women, to the elven human hybrids who are sparkly, they had dark skin, they had head coverings on, and they had sharp teeth. But they were very beautiful and laughing and kind of vapid. And he was saying to them, I would very much like to see the elves. I would very much like to speak to the elves. I would very much like to. But that's pretty much all he can say because he's hindered by his language, and they're just kind of laughing like, no, you can't speak to them, and just completely flipping it off, not even allowing themselves to think about that option, that could be true, because they're under their own slavery as well, their own mental slavery, not realizing they have the choice to choose. So these women, these two women who were human women in the incineration chamber, started to stretch, and the powers that be that were corralling them did not even realize that there could even be a subversive attempt here. Subversion was something that, rebellion was something that was not even existent, because the slavery was so deep that no one ever even thought to rebel, so no one recognized it as a rebellion. So the fact that the two people who I was observing, the girl and her android, didn't get into the incineration chamber or the gas chamber, or whatever it was, went over the heads as something that was a rebellion for the powers that be. It just seemed like something that didn't work, and it would work itself out. So then only the girl and the android are there in the empty hallway. And by now they've attracted attention of the powers that be. And at some point, either the android rose up, because now I'm kind of observing from his perspective, the android either rose up to speak to the organizer of this area, or the organizer came down to speak to him, or a screen came up where the organizer was on. I'm not exactly sure of the logistics of it. I just know that the android and the organizer are regarding each other at this point. And the android is looking at the organizer, and my consciousness observing is realizing that this organizer, who seems like the head honcho, the dude in charge, is a slave as well. Because he was sitting in some type of floating chair that he was fused with. He was bodily fused, connected in a way that you can't get away, to this device that he was riding in, and it was kind of like a chair. And he was disgusting, really unhealthy, death's door, gross type of dude, not kind at all, really messed up, and not with good intentions, but not because he chose to not be of good intentions, because he was a slave too, and he was working within his own paradigm of what was possible. And also he was a little power drunk, because he did have power over what was going on with the people below him, but he was also pretty darn low. He just didn't know. And so the android again is saying, I would very much like to speak to the elves. And the guy in charge is like, no one gets to speak to the elves. That's ridiculous. It was completely ludicrous for the android to even ask. It just wasn't going to happen at all. And so then the android returns to the floor. If he had risen up, I'm not sure. I think he had somehow been lifted. And the screen goes blank, or the guy in charge goes back away somewhere. And then there's another clearing. But this time it's a clearing in one of the alcoves. And this alcove is being cleared, and there are these little mazes coming out that remind me of at an amusement park when you're going to go into a roller coaster, and the maze that you're kind of in before you get to the roller coaster. They were kind of like that, but they were walls, and smaller beings were being cleared out of here. They were beings that were the size of maybe medium to small animals, and they were all different kinds of beings. I didn't really focus on them, because from inside the android's mind at this point, I was just mostly worried about not getting corralled and killed. The people corralling these were women. And these women were the types of women who you have probably interacted with. They're usually in some position of power. I had teachers like this growing up who seemed nice and sweet and smiley, but really they're not nice. And really they will not budge. And really they don't actually care about you. It's just their mask to be nice and sweet and smiley. And no, you'll go this way. It's kind of like, if you read the Harry Potter books, it's kind of like the Umbridge woman who seemed nice and smiley and then was cutting Harry Potter up with the pen. That type of consciousness. And the android in this case, did end up not getting corralled. He did end up getting the attention of someone, because everyone else went by. And although he didn't create the diversion he wanted, he did create a diversion large enough. So now it was another clearing, the third clearing, where everyone was gone, and just he and his girl, his owner, companion, who was a human, were left. So that is part 3 of the dream. There's definitely more to come, and I'll record it in another video directly.